Why are South Africans who surrendered their firearms still on the Firearms registry? Is the Central Firearms Registry professionally run? Why has Police Minister Nathi Nhleko said the Central Firearms Registry is in shambles? And what are the key impediments towards implementing the Firearms Control Act? This is Question Time. Hello, my name is Alicia Jali, standing in for Mr. Mpotsedu. Now, the SABC News investigation has revealed that South Africans who voluntarily surrendered firearms 7 years ago are still on the Central Firearms Registry. The registry is mandated to process firearms applications in all provinces and maintain a database of legal firearm owners in keeping with the firearms control legislation. By his own admission, though, Police Minister Nathi Nhleko recently said the SAPS-run firearms registry is in shambles, which significantly affects gun control and the implementation of the Firearms Control Act. Other reports indicate that the registry's offices faces numerous challenges, including storage corruption, staff shortage, and matters related to the application and license renewal processes. A reminder that you can call us and air your views on the following numbers: 089-110-4210 or 002789-110-4210. And our Twitter handle is @QuestionTime24. My guests today are Ms. Griselda Lewis, SABC reporter, and joining us from our Pretoria studios is Mr. Vish Naidu, SAPS, and on the line we will have Ms. Claire Taylor from Gun Free South Africa. Panel, a very good afternoon and evening to all of you. Thank you so much for joining us. Griselda, let's start with you in studio. Good evening.
Thank you very much, Alicia, for having me.
Mr. Naidu in Pretoria, thank you so much, sir, for joining us here on Question Time.
Very good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
Griselda, you did about an investigation and you looked into the matters pertaining the number of people that were actually still on the list of the central registration for gun licenses, and those people were actually the people that voluntarily returned their firearms to the police station. But why are they still there? What did you uncover? Tell us a bit about your investigation.
Well, Alicia, it initially started when allegations were brought to the SABC that some of the people who had voluntarily surrendered their firearms in the 2007-2008 financial year, that 7 years later or 8 years later, you'd find that their names still appear on the Central Firearms Registry. So a lot of concern was raised by these individuals who brought these concerns to us about what then happens in the event, because what the process was at the time is, and what is the process at the moment when you want to voluntarily surrender your firearm. You would go to a police station and hand it over, and then essentially all the data would then be sent to the Central Firearms Register pertaining to the fact that you've handed in your firearm now. So about 3 to 4 people that we have spoke to, and many others that have come to the front, have said that their names still appear on this list even 7 years later. One of the sources that we spoke to said to us that he was in the process in 2012 of applying for a job within the security sector. And when he applied for a job, they asked him if he had owned a personal firearm, and his response was no, on the simple basis that he had surrendered that firearm in 2008. And the then people who wanted to employ him indicated, or rather accused him of lying, because the Central Firearms Register had indicated that in fact he does have a firearm, but he says he doesn't have one that was surrendered way back then.
Mr. Naidu, have you looked into these allegations? I mean, these are serious and damning allegations, and what have you uncovered, sir?
Well, to a certain extent, I must agree with Griselda on these allegations. There have been 1 or 2 incidents that have been uncovered where the firearm owner's name has not been removed from the system. But then that's not all doom and gloom, because when a firearm owner hands in his firearm on a voluntary basis, we actually provide that firearm owner with written proof that his firearm has been handed in. We have what is called, and these are official documents, we have what is called the SAP 522A and the SAP 522B. The 522A is a voluntary surrender form which is completed in triplicate. So is the SAP 522B, which is completed in triplicate, and a copy is handed to the firearm owner. The A is a voluntary surrender form and the B is a forfeiture form. Then we have a SAP 523 form, which is an acknowledgement of receipt. That as well is given to the firearm owner. So if the firearm owner has now declared to any company, or for whatever other reason he may have declared that his firearm, that he is not a legal firearm owner, then and the contrary is proven, then he has those documents which he can furnish to prove that he indeed submitted the firearms to the Central Firearm Registry. If whichever organization that is presenting this argument to doesn't accept it, they can always come to us and we can verify this. So it's not all doom and gloom. I mean, now we rely on computer systems. What if one day that all the computer systems crash? We're going to have to resort to the hard copies, to the documents, and the proof is there that firearms have indeed been handed in.
But Brigadier, then why is the 400 million rand firearms control system according to the minister himself, in shambles? What's going on there? It seems that there's not enough tracking of what's happening.
You know, a few years ago, I did an interview with Chrisella yesterday, and I did acknowledge this. A few years ago, we had serious problems at the Firearm Control Registry. We have decisively dealt with that situation. We arrested the commander of that environment. She was criminally charged. She was dismissed from the organization. Following that, we arrested a further 20 people, some of whom have also been dismissed. Others are facing criminal charges. Some of them we found to have been vindicated and they've returned to work. So we've dealt with that. Remember, in any organization you go to, no organization is infallible, no person is infallible. You would have, if you're dealing with a human element, you would have human error taking place. And we acknowledge that in this case, there could be one of many reasons why the system was not dealt with properly, why the person's names have not been removed from the system properly. It could have been a technical glitch, it could have been a negligence on the part of the member that was receiving the firearm, compiling those 3 documents that I told you about, and has failed to remove the name from the system. But once that is brought to our attention, it can be immediately rectified, which is the case of these people that Chriselda has mentioned.
And I'll get back to you just now, Brigadier. Chriselda, please tell us more, because I don't understand, why is this a problem for us in the country then, if we have a manageable system that works and tracks?
Look, Alicia, the problem here is that it begs to ask the question, if you have people who are still registered, or you have guns that are still registered against persons who have handed in their firearms, it seems to give off the impression that the Central Firearms Registry doesn't know exactly who has a gun in this country. Maybe Brigadier Vishnaidu would be able to address that issue a bit. And it also begs to ask the question, many of the affected persons are saying, this is inconveniencing, number one. While I agree with Brigadier Vishnaidu when he says that there are documents then that would remove liability from these affected persons, but if in particular, and I know that Brigadier Vishnaidu will agree with me, we've spoken about this particular aspect where he agreed that if in the event some of these firearms, police have previously arrested individuals who were believed at the time to have taken the very same firearms that were handed over, that were surrendered, police officers, and those firearms were given over to gangs in the Western Cape. So with a situation like that, the concern is that from these affected persons, they don't know where these firearms are. If a firearm is given over to a police station and it is kept at the police station, if something happens, if it happens that one of those guns lands up in the hands of rogue police officers, for example, then they believe that it would be quite inconveniencing, because the first point of questioning would be the person in whose name that gun is registered. But then at a later stage, of course, you would then be absolved of any responsibility, as he says. The checks and balances would come into place. But it begs to ask the question, do we have a central firearms registry in South Africa that knows exactly how many persons in this country have guns? Because clearly, by the indications now, I'm not saying you would recall that back in 2007 and 2008, in that financial year, more than 11,000 people had surrendered their firearms voluntarily. But we're not saying that all 11,000 of those people, their names have not been removed from the Central Firearms Registry. But the question is, then, how many exactly are there? How many South Africans are sitting with firearms that are no longer in their possession, but on this register, it indicates that I'm an owner of such a firearm.
Brigadier Naidu says the system seems to be able to track them, but we'll get more into that after the break. And a reminder that you can call us and air your views on the following number, 089-110-4210 or 002789-110-4210, or tweet us. Our handle is @QuestionTime24. Question Time will be right back after this. Please stay with us.
In Africa, mobile devices are tools to make payments, browse the internet, and keep governments in check with social media forums.
It's given an average African too much power in their hands.
And tech creativity is solving some of the continent's problems.
Everything is internet driven.
And on Network, we tell you how Africans are using technology and social media in their everyday lives.
Join Siphumelele Zondi on Network every Sunday at 19:30 CAT.
Welcome back. You're still watching Question Time. And of course, my guest today are Ms. Griselda Lewis, SABC reporter. And in Pretoria, we are joined by Brigadier Vish Naidu from the SAPS. All right, so Brigadier, let's get into the issue here. And everybody's blaming the system. How are you able to track this system against corruption? Are you able to make sure that every person that has brought back a gun can be made sure that that gun is not going to get out of their hands, and then somebody is going to give it to somebody else to commit a crime, and then it's back to square one again? This person has to be arrested. And also the issue of immunity and any eventuality of the guns, but then those people are hunted down again and brought to book after ballistic tests.
Alicia, I did speak to Griselda about this. We arrested one of our own colleagues for having provided guns to gangs in the Western Cape. Now, the mere fact that we were able to identify this and bring this person to book is indicative of the system that we have in place to prevent such things from taking place. We have, as Griselda rightfully put it, we have checks and balances to make sure that all the equipment we have, firearms, ammunition, and so forth, that can be accounted for. And I also indicated that if a firearm that was handed in voluntarily by a lawful owner, if it's found that that firearm was used in the commission of a crime, the lawful owner has these documentation not only in his possession but also in our possession to verify that that firearm was actually handed in to the police before that crime was actually committed by the lawful, was handed in by the lawful owner to the police before that crime was actually committed. So there's no cause for alarm or concern by the license holder that he may be criminally implicated in any other crime. As far as your question goes in terms of how many firearms there are in circulation and so forth, we will not be able to tell you how many firearms there are, but we are able to tell you how many licensed firearms there are, because every firearm that is licensed, we have record of it.
Are these legal or illegal firearms, Brigadier? Are these illegal or legal firearms that you can be able to track?
We can only track the legal firearms, the ones that we license. The illegal firearms, we can tell you how many we recover, but we cannot tell you how many there are in circulation. We can only tell you how many we recover. The legal firearms, we will know how many there are in circulation because we legalize them, we license them. We have a central firearm registry that keeps record and data of those licensed firearms, so we'll be able to ttell you that.
All right. So, Criselda, when speaking to some of these people that, of course, you've conducted the investigation with, some of the people that have brought back their guns voluntarily and are still on the list, what are their feelings now with still being on the list after they came themselves to say, look, we came to the call of the nation to say, look, return those guns that you don't need or don't want?
The majority that we've spoken to, Alicia, are quite disappointed in the manner in which this process has unfolded, because many of those that we spoke to had legal firearms and they decided they did not want the firearms any longer. So the expectation was that their names would be removed off the Central Firearms Registry. And, you know, the question is, why does it have to take 7 years? Why does it need to take 10 years or 8 years in order for the names of those individuals to be removed off this list? I understand when Brigadier Vishnaju says that there were concerns that were raised. We know that arrests have been made. They've dealt in part with the situation at the Central Firearms Registry. But certainly it doesn't seem to be all roses at the Central Firearms Registry, because we've got, in particular at this point, one a gun association, the Black Gun Owners Association, that is considering taking government to court over failing to execute its duties in removing the names of these individuals off the Central Firearms Registry. We're unable to get at this stage, Alicia, to exactly how many people this actually affects, because you recall since 2006, this process has been unfolding. In 2005 and 2010, we had processes where there was that amnesty that government called on South Africans, on citizens, and others, of course, to give up their firearms. And even those who had illegal firearms in their possession, they would then get amnesty. But the others relating to the voluntarily surrendering your firearm, that seems to be one of the questions that is really raising alarm. And, you know, many of the people that we have spoken to are saying they need this situation to be resolved. As I've already pointed out, that one individual says there's a concern, of course, that he wanted to get a job in the security sector, and in filling out a form where you're asked if you have a firearm, you simply respond no, because as far as you know, you've handed in your firearm. But according to the documentation and what is stated on the official documents at the Central Firearms Registry, it says you've got a weapon.
Well, just to remind our viewers that you can please call us on the numbers that will appear on your screens. There they are, and give us your views on this topic today. Now, Brigadier, just how far, still on this matter, just how far is the registration department in? How far are they in terms of removing those names of people that shouldn't be on the list anymore?
Well, for those that are brought to our attention, it can be done immediately. All we require is the ID number of the individual. We go into the system and then we ensure. But we first check the documentation that I explained to you, the SAP 522A and B and the SAP 523. We check it against that and to make sure that indeed those firearms were handed in when the owner says it was handed in, and then we'll remove it from the system. But Alicia, I just want to take you back quickly. You know, there's 3 different ways in which we recover firearms. The one is operations, the one is the amnesty that Criselda referred to, where that we had in 2005 and 2010, where it was declared that any person who has a firearm in their possession illegally can hand in that firearm, provided that that firearm has not been used in the commission of any other crime, whether it's armed robbery, murder, whatever the case may be. We will accept that firearm. But of course, we will do necessary ballistic testing to determine whether or not that firearm was used. Then you have another category, which is the voluntary surrender. Now, you would recall that the Firearm Control Act was passed in 2005, and since 2006 to date, we have had over 117,000 firearms handed to us. That's through voluntary surrender, and this is the process I told you where the forms of the surrender, the forfeiture, and then of course the acknowledgement of receipt is provided to the individuals. These are 117,000 firearms. Now, you have to agree, no organization, not even SABC, will function optimally at 100% level.
All right,
so
Brigadier.
Criselda herself has said there's been 1 or 2 individuals whose names have not been on the system.
All right,
So if
Brigadier.
you're operating at 99%, I think it's acceptable. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to ask you now if a person themselves can check whether or not they still actually appear on the registrar. But let's take Adrian from the Free State on the line. Adrian, thank you so much for joining us. Your comment or question, please. Adrian, good afternoon. Please go ahead with your comment or question.
Good afternoon to you all. Thanks for taking my call. I just want to ask the police officer there. They just showed now a rifle laying on the ground. That is R4 or R5. No private citizen can own a R4 or R5 in this country. So most of the weapons that is on the street, unlegal, is stolen by the police. It's sold by the police. That is my question. I mean, if you take this 1 million guns given back by private citizens, then there's about 3 million weapons stolen by the police.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for taking my question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adrian, even though his line was very bad. I'm not sure if you heard him, Brigadier, but please go ahead and tell us, how can individuals then go themselves to check if their names have been removed off the registrar?
They can go to the what we have at police stations is are designated firearm officers. They can go to the designated firearm officer and produce their ID numbers, or even take these forms that I've mentioned earlier, and using that information, we can check on the system, and then we'll be able to establish if or not their names have been removed from the system.
All right, so hopefully they won't be running away from being scared to be arrested, Criselda.
Yes, Alicia, I wanted to add to what the Brigadier was saying is that, the first point of the handing in of this firearm would, of course, be at the police station. So there you've got the designated firearms officer and the station commander. And, in my conversation with the Brigadier for our story, which is going to be aired on SABC News this evening, questions then should be raised also about who is not doing their job.
Absolutely.
Somebody is not doing their job here in that those documents that were supposed to be sent to the relevant office after you've handed over that firearm, which must then indicate that Alicia Jali has sent in her firearm, she no longer wants it, then the relevant documentation needs to be sent to the relevant department so that that relevant department is able to scrap that off or against your name to indicate that Alicia Jali no longer has that firearm in her possession. So is there going to be an investigation is something also that we want to know into these police stations who are found to have not done their job.
That's a very interesting observation. Brigadier, let's talk about this. How is the corruption affecting professional running of the firearms registry? Please tell us, and please touch base on what Criselda has also said.
Well, I did mention to Criselda yesterday that once we discover that a owner's name has not been removed from the system, we have to determine what was the cause of that. Was it because there was a technical glitch on the system, or was it because there was sheer negligence on the part of the member who was responsible for following the processes and procedures in having that particular transaction, if I may call it that, finalized? And of course, if it's the latter, then heads must roll, because if there's neglect in the performance of their duty, then they must account, and departmental action must be contemplated.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Criselda. And of course, Brigadier Naidu joining us from Pretoria. That was question time for today. Very big thank you to my guests and for you at home for watching. Business Reviews up next with Mr. Of course, it is Frances Hurd. She is over there looking at us. Goodbye for now.